partner with KPMG, responsibility of the Galway office, but perhaps more challenging for markets in the BMW region on behalf of KPMG. I'm delighted to be the moderator here this morning, and I don't intend to do a lot of talking because there was very, very interesting speakers in the panel this morning. Immediately on my left is immediately on my left is Anne Bannon. Anne is a senior manager with AIB and has a lot of experience in working with VCs in the past and more recently, currently with AIB. And I'm looking forward to hear what Anne has to say about the AIB's perspective on SMEs, HPSUs, particularly with regard to Medtech and particularly with regard to West of Ireland. With a particular sole focus in the West of Ireland is Gillian Buckley, who's the lead for the Western Development Commission, who have a statutory role in focusing on SMEs, among others, and also focusing on Medtech within that sector in a geography ranging from Galway down to Roscommon and down to Clare and everything west of that. So Gillian's very experienced, and she certainly knows how to pick winners, as we'll see in a few moments, in terms of the companies that they've selected and invested in over the years. And then also on the far left is Lokesh Joshi. Lokesh has the very responsible and prestigious job of being the Vice President of Research here at the university. And I'm really looking forward to hearing what Lokesh has to say, because he'll bring a very different perspective in terms of what is happening on campus in terms of R&D, collaboration with industry, and what's on the horizon. I think he's got some very interesting things to say about that in terms of what's the next big thing or things coming along before us. So are we really as good as we say in terms of one of the leading hubs in the world for Medtech and so on? Well, you don't have to believe me. There's some independent data about Ireland generally, for example. It's Forbes found that we're one of the best countries in the world for doing business. The 2015 study by the Global Innovation Index said that we're one of the top 10 innovative countries in the world. According to the IMD World Competitiveness Yearbook in 2014, number one for skilled labour, flexibility, adaptability, and attitude to globalisation. And labour productivity is higher in Ireland than in the US, the UK, France, Germany, Japan, and the Netherlands. So that's very interesting and very encouraging for prospective FDI companies looking at coming in here. The education system is ranked in the top 10 in the world, and it's the number one destination according to IBM Global Locating Trends report in 2014. Number one destination, Ireland, in terms of inward investment by quality and value of investment projects. What about the Medtech sector? We are one of the emerging 5 big clusters or hubs in the world. The market value in 2018 is expected to be 475 billion globally in the Medtech sector. The employment in Ireland in Medtech is 27,000 people. That's the second highest employment in Medtech in Europe. Second highest in Europe. Can anybody tell me which is the highest employer of Medtech in Europe? Do you want to guess? Not Germany. UK? No. France? No. Switzerland. So you don't have to be big and powerful if you have a niche. We're the second largest exporter of Medtech in Europe, worth 8.5 billion last year. Interestingly, half of the Medtech companies in Ireland, of which there are 400, half of them are Indigenous. And since 2014, over 2,000 jobs have been announced in Ireland in the Medtech sector, and an investment of almost 1 billion euros since 2014. So it's vibrant, it's a huge value add, and it's got great synergies, particularly with institutions like NUIG. So I suppose pushing on in terms of involving the panelists, and you don't want to be listening to me, maybe first question to Gillian in your role as lead for the WDC. With that fertile ground, super companies in terms of FDI and then the spin-offs in terms of the Indigenous sector, selecting companies by you for the WDC must be really easy.
Not necessarily. No, I suppose the Medtech sector has been one, for us, has been particularly lucrative. We've had some very strong successes and plenty more to come. We've over 20 companies in the Medtech life science area that we've invested in, which in a national context, would be the largest portfolio of medtech, even though we're not a specialist or we're not even a national or a global life science investor. What stands out, I think, for me is that our fund set up in the early noughties, I think around the same time that there was a real movement of spin-outs from the multinationals in particular, probably the second wave, and we've a lot to thank that people like John O'Shaughnessy and Ian Quinn, John O'Dea, those people who kind of were the pioneers of the first round. I think hopefully the third round will be even more lucrative for everybody, because the current crop, they're getting the experience, they're going back in, having the lessons learned, and will be leaner and meaner as they were talking in the previous, and hopefully build even faster and more global businesses, because again, a lot of the companies that we would invest in, the trade sale is the exit, and if we really need to go scale in this region, we want to build them ourselves and hang on to them longer if possible.
I think the objective of the WDC is to be self-sustaining in terms of your investments, and you've got to be careful, obviously, with the funding and so on. And I think you've been very successful. We'll probably see some companies going to market in the not distant future. Your selection criteria, what is the process? Are you happy to be first in? Do you like to co-invest? Do you like to follow a lead maybe of a specialist VC, like perhaps Fountain? What is the strategy?
Well, for us, we're usually the first in, very early stage on, especially in medtech. So we would normally we have to co-invest with the private sector as one of the European rules. We'd normally have Enterprise Ireland in the mix, but because of the scale of the first round for medtechs, it can be up to 2 to 3 million. It's a mix of both the seed funds and the angel investors. And there's a dedicated angel network based here out of Galway, which is fantastic for the medtech sector. And we've done quite a good number of co-investments with them. And we hope to do a lot more with that. But it's a big funding round, so the funding continues to be challenging. You could have 6 or 8 parties in any funding round, so that is a lot for an entrepreneur to try and develop, and we're trying to work at the investor in to make that process more streamlined for them. But the basics of investment is around the team. You have to have a good idea, you have to have a market, they're kind of given, but it's the team that will drive it on, and you'll hear that repeatedly. And it is a team. I mean, to me, the myth of the entrepreneur as an individual is not well founded. It's the team, and certainly the best projects we've invested in have been team orientated. There might be a lead within that, but they bring on a good team with them.
Okay, and you alluded to the experienced mentors around the city, like John O'Shaughnessy, John O'Dea, John Power now as well, and Ian Quinn and so on, and they are fantastic and very generous in their time and so on. Maybe Anne, if I just turn to yourself, your background, you've been in finance for many years, VC before you joined AIB, and I suppose in recent times, AIB being one of the main pillar banks, you've had a particular focus on a mix of VC activity, loan support for the SMEs, and of course, very recently we've seen your significant and very generous investment in support of the Portershed, which is the ICT sector. Tell us about your view of the medtech sector, and is there anything hot about to happen or break?
Well, I suppose we recognise the importance of the medtech sector to the future of the Irish economy. I've seen it evolving. I've been involved in lending and investment over the last 25 years. I would have seen the situation where I was involved in venture capital in the late 90s, and there was an awful lot of tech investment with very little life science. The reality of it was there's very little life science opportunities then. As Gillian was saying, the first wave of spin-outs came in the early noughties, and you can really see how it's picked up momentum over the last 10 years with the setup of the dedicated VC funds, life science VC funds, Fountain and Saroba in particular. There's been a huge amount of increase in investment, equity investment into the sector. It's actually increased sixfold over the period 2010 to 2015. It went from 20 million up to 145 million over that period. So we recognise the potential that the sector has to the economy, and we're keen to support it in whatever way we can. In terms of AIB's specific supports, we are one of the biggest venture capital and seed investors in the country. We've over 125 million committed to 9 funds. As part of that, we've invested in 30 life science and healthcare IT companies through AIB Seed Fund and the other funds. So in terms of the future, we see that the evolution of the sector is continuing all the time. And as Julian was saying, more as people set up businesses, grow them, achieve success and exits, they reinvest back into new companies. I think anybody who's worked in a multinational, set up a startup and grew that over the years, they then are bought out and have to stay maybe with the project for a couple of years after that. They typically don't want to stay long term in a large company, so their instincts are to set up a new company. So I think that's really great, and the more that we can get, the more healthy the sector will be.
Thank you, Anna. I'm keen to get a contribution from each of the panelists. Lokesh, you are the Vice President of Research here at NUIG. Also, my notes tell me Director of the Alimentary Glycoscience Research Cluster at NUIG, which they tell me at home, my science family members, that it's a study of sugar, I suppose, in the gut, basically, and how that contributes to your overall body. Also, you're the Science Foundation Ireland Stokes Professor of Glycoscience here at the college. You also have an entrepreneurial background. You were the co-founder and chief scientific officer for Arizona Engineered Therapeutics. So you have a good mix of academic background and indeed currently, together with the entrepreneurial flair. I'd be very interested to hear, I know a little bit about what happens in BioInnovate. I'd like to hear, I suppose, the transition of the university, from sort of being empirical research to having a commercial flair, the linkages with industry, and I'd really be interested to hear what's the next big thing, what's on the horizon, what's going to take us forward and make us, one of the centre hubs for business in the world.
Thank you, Brian. I think, as you mentioned, I guess my position has responsibility, but I think it's also a great position. And the biggest perk is that I get the eagle eye view of the university's research. I think I get to see in my role as a VP research is that there was happening at the university. And as a researcher, we can all live in our silos, or it can be single track that you can just look back and forth, but I think you don't get to see the sideways views outside the box, what's happening. So going back to what university is doing, what university is about, I guess university is really about giving back to the community, being bold, being entrepreneurial. An entrepreneur doesn't just mean to start a company, but it's a different way of thinking, it's questioning, really thinking about what's next and preparing the students and researchers to deliver what's next. University has about 17,000 students. They engage in different entrepreneurial programs. We have very good faculty, researchers who are, again, involved at very high level research, so internationally competitive, as well as entrepreneurial activities. There's a lot happening in the university right now. I guess one thing where we fail is if we don't promote ourselves as well as we do. So that's one thing that I think we need to do better. You mentioned, Brian, BioInnovate. It's one of our flagship programs in the university that's doing really well. And I meet with some of the students who are part of BioInnovate, and they are really looking at unmet medical needs. And their solutions are very, very innovative. Some of them seem simple, but they're really working at the cutting edge of science, engineering, and medicine. So that's something we're very proud of them. And now John Breslin, who's sitting in the back, has just started the Tech Innovate, which will be based on a similar kind of principle, but it's going to focus more on ICT and of the entrepreneurship. But so that really kind of gives me kind of a room to say where university is going next and where the world is going next. And as I was discussing with you, Brian, before, is that the way when I travel around the world, when you meet with the people around the globe, it's really about convergence. We're living in a world that's more and more interdependent and interconnected. I don't see things in silos anymore. I don't see things in isolation anymore. I see things that are very connected. So one of the convergence we are seeing that's already happening is the mobile devices and healthcare devices, the app generation. What's happening is that the whole area of medical technologies, medical devices, pharmaceuticals, theranostics, diagnostics, and the ICT are merging into each other to give a fuller solution, better solution to the public, to the patient, to the consumers. And I think this is where I feel, and there are better people than me in this room and on the community, that Galway is very well positioned to take the leadership in the future. We have the best of the best. As you mentioned, that Ireland employs close to 27,000 people in Medtech. About half of them are in Galway region, right? And then we have significant presence of industries, but also academic excellence, entrepreneurial activity in the IT and ICT sector as well. So I guess the opportunity there is to bridge the two together and come up with what is the future. We're sitting at the cusp of the future. Can we make it happen in Galway? Can we be a spike in the world where we can be seen, anything from Stanford to Sydney, that Galway is a place that's taking the lead in these areas? That's what I'd like to see. Okay.
And we're not just a medtech hub, we are an ICT hub as well. If you look around, there are very significant players here on the ground in ICT. And I would think that GMIT and NUIG in particular could be a great catalyst for assisting the convergence process. Is that happening, or have we a long way to go to make it happen?
Okay, you're absolutely right. I think GMIT and NUI Galway should work more closer than they are at the moment, and there are very distinct possibilities of the two working together. Because at the end of the day, I think this is really about people. What do we give back to our community? What do we give back to the world as a community, as a city here? So just to say that they are really good interaction, not only with GMIT, but all the way to Sligo IT and Letterkenny IT as well. So we're trying to bring the whole Western region together and be an equal partner, because nobody owns intellect, nobody owns intelligence and ideas. We're all equal partners. We just located in different institutions, different cities or places. We work together to bring our ideas, really, I think that's the thing. Now, being in NUI Galway or GMIT, Sligo IT, Letterkenny IT, the advantage universities have is to work with the industries. But what universities and IoTs can bring together is not just the technology, because when you bring any technology, it has implications on the society, it has implications on the ethics, the law, the policies. So universities can bring those aspects as well. So you really make it acceptable, and something that will have positive impact on the society.
Okay. In our practice, we're seeing a huge amount of investment in research and development. The incentive was brought in about 12 years ago for R&D tax credits. And I personally have never seen the international environment as competitive as it is for foreign direct investment. And while we heard a lot of countries complaining about our low corporate tax rate over the last number of years, particularly when we were getting the bailout through the Troika, a lot of those countries were systematically reducing their corporate tax rates as well, apart from France, but I think their effective tax rate is actually quite low anyway. With the introduction of the knowledge development box as well, I think it'll be another great catalyst whereby you can achieve significant savings when you come to commercialize the product emerging from the R&D activity. To what extent is college focused on commercialization of research that you're doing on campus, and to what extent is there current cooperation with industry? Is it greater than it was? Is it accelerating? What's the landscape like?
Okay. I always believe we can always do better, right? But what I've seen in the last 4 years, and when I was in my position as a professor before that as well, that Galway has a unique flair to it, and they're very proactive in many ways, right? So we are fully aware, something that I didn't understand when I moved to Galway, is that there's a difference in Dublin and everybody else outside, But I think Galway holds its own position and takes the leadership in certain areas. And university here is very ambitious, very proactive, and it's really punching way above its weight in all the metrics that we are measured by anywhere in the world, So I really believe that university has done great in the last 10 years or so, can even do better, because I know that we have tremendous capacity. The way I like to see in the university, and I've really had discussions with senior leaders in the university, is that what I see is just the tip of the iceberg. We have the whole 85% still underwater in terms of capacity, potential, and translatability, commercialization potential that's just sitting there. We just need to work together, build better communication, better teams, better bridges to bring it out. But just to answer your specific question, Brian, university has expanded its network of industries. It's partly because of the hunger university has, partly because of the people we have, but partly it's kind of almost enforced or influenced by the national and international policies and funding agencies. that you will find it hard now to get funding in the university unless you have a strong industry partner. So everybody's going out to say, okay, look, I'm working on this problem. It may seem like very basic science, but it has this potential application down the road. Can we work with you? So this university really is very active, and I really enjoy working with the researchers here because they can see the connection to what they're doing with the people. So really, they can do the excellent basic research, but the application is always in their mind.
Okay.
So that's what they're doing.
Okay, very good. Gillian and Anne, I suppose a question to the two of you, maybe Gillian first. There may be budding entrepreneurs in the audience or those looking, we say, to take their company further along the road. Your selection criteria, Gillian, in terms of investing, either by way of equity or a loan, can you outline maybe a little bit about that and you know, proposals that you see? What do you look for? And is it, to what extent is it the person, is it the team, and is it the product?
Yeah. Well, as you alluded earlier, we are a commercial investment fund, so we are on an evergreen basis. We're self-sustaining, so we've got no government money for the last 6 years. So we operate it as a business, so we have to make money. So one of the key criteria is for us that there is a return on investment for the kind of risk we take. So again, depending on the project, if it's a loan, then we have an interest rate and we get repaid quickly. But if it's a medtech, it could be 7 to 10 years before we see our exits. So you need to have a multiple of the investment. So the return on investment is certainly one of the key criteria, but in order to achieve that, you have to invest in good businesses, and they are developed by strong teams and strong entrepreneurs. The Buy Innovate program has been mentioned a couple of times. I think it's an amazing program because it actually goes at how to set up a business in the correct manner. What does the market need? And then build from that. A lot of businesses somebody comes up with an idea and thinks there might be a market for it, and they find out too late, and we go back to the lean principles. They find out too late that actually, no, it's not what the market needed. Or they find out that, one of my stories is that if you make it in pink, we'll buy it. Well, if you do make it in pink, they'll want it in green, and then they'll want it in purple. So again, coming back to the lean principles, until people actually put their hand in their pocket, what they tell you they might want is completely different from what they actually want. So don't be put off. It's a no. You want it in pink, it's a no. You have to sell what you have as well. So it's a combination of really the team and the market and the ability to convince. I mean, you have to convince investors first of all. If you can convince investors, then you convince the market to buy your product as well. Can I just take a wider comment overall? Again, around the regional kind of flag. Galway is a huge centre for Medtech, but it's also in the region, the western region. There's a lot of stuff in the programme for government that we all need to try and make sure that they actually deliver on, because to try and encourage entrepreneurship, the entrepreneur has to be encouraged and the entrepreneur has to be incentivised. So we've mentioned earlier, I was having a chat with Brian beforehand, the whole taxation issue. There is moves afoot to try and bring down the capital gains tax, but there also needs to be moves afoot to try and encourage more private investment into the sector, because the angels bring the smart knowledge with them, they bring the money, and they are really key to unlock entrepreneurship at the very early stage before you can be ready to go to the venture capitalists. I was with Dave over in the UK, and they keep reminding us, if you're an investor in the UK, you have 84% of your money back before the actual investment succeeds or fails. So the risk threshold for them is very low. We need to encourage government to continue with that. Delighted to see that the PAYE allowance is going to be spread to the self-employed, and that hopefully PRSI benefits will be as well. Entrepreneurs need to be nurtured. They do an amazing job. I work with them every day of the week. I don't know how they do it. It is a roller coaster, and without them driving our economy, we will go backwards. So everything we can do to support them needs to be done.
Very good, Gillian. I was given a presentation recently on tax, and I was quite taken by a slide I put up about the marginal personal tax rates around the world. Key countries that might be competitors for Ireland, for example, with regard to foreign direct investment. And you could be forgiven for thinking that we're not too out of line in terms of our top rate of taxation. However, the big difference, the big negative, is the point of entry at where you start to pay that top rate of tax. It's a multiple of that level of income in the US and the UK. So we have an awful lot to do. It's one thing attracting the companies, but to attract the talent underlining that. I mean, you know, it's a nice place to live and all that kind of stuff, but if you have half your income gone in tax, it's not that attractive. So we have a lot to do. It's not just about the corporate carrot. We need to improve matters for the individuals and those living here as well permanently. Just in terms of your objective in terms of the payback for the investment, you were saying Medtech, it could be 8 or 9 years. What sort of multiples are you looking for, and what are you finding? Or is that a trade secret?
It's a trade secret, yeah. You hear 10x out in the marketplace, but the VC model is that 1 in 10, 1 in 12 will actually succeed and give you that return in order for you to have a successful fund.
Okay.
So we're a little bit more modest in our ambitions. We'd rather a lot more succeed and pay us back a little bit less, so we have an overall decent return on investment. So we would look, I suppose, 3 to 5x would be a reasonable return
Okay.
from our
Okay.
for a good project.
Okay. Can I
And that's
also-
for the risk taken, you know, it depends on the risk taken.
Okay, I'll come to you in a second. Just finally, Gillian, when do you invest by way of equity, and when do you advance loans, and why?
Well, loans would be completely reliant on the ability of the project to repay, so that's cash flow based. So if you're generating revenue and profits, then you can service a loan.
Okay.
Equity is to actually build the business. There may be no, and it's particularly in Medtech, many of our companies never generate any revenue. They get sold
Okay.
once product is developed and regulatory approved. So
Okay.
it depends on the type of project you are. We can do a mix.
Okay.
You know,
And
we're
maybe the
open
founder,
to all ideas and suggestions.
maybe the founder doesn't want to give away any equity either.
Yeah, like we recently, just to go back to Lashley's point, we did a micro loan of 25,000 to a project that's ICT but in the med device space, selling product
That's
into
interesting.
hospitals. So
It's conversions.
you know, yeah.
Very good. Anne, the AIB's attitude, I suppose, to advancing funds and so on, what sort of criteria do you look for? You know, imagine the budding entrepreneur out in the audience there. How should they prepare themselves? What kind of proposals do you like to see?
Well, I suppose, unlike Gillian, we're happy to take on all companies and individuals as customers. In terms of the sort of initiatives we have, we're obviously keen to take on customers at the early stage in the startup phase. The bank is running its national Backing Brave campaign, which is targeting startups, recognises the importance of them. And we also have a specific initiative that we're running, a joint venture we've been running with the Irish Times for a few years, called the Startup Academy. That programme offers a prize package of €250,000 to the ultimate winner, and this year I'm pleased to say the winner was a medical technology company called Nasal Medical. In terms of, obviously we've invested in the equity funds, so they're managed by third parties, so they make independent decisions, but we try and facilitate introductions and so on. We're also involved in building the sector profile. We've run a number of initiatives with the Irish Medical Device Association. We're involved in sponsorship of their annual conference. We also do a series of outlook reports. We published one there in January on the medical technology sector. I think that's important from the point of view of raising the profile of the sector and making state and politicians and everybody else aware of its importance. It, I suppose, historically would be less vocal in terms of looking for publicity compared with, say, the tech sector. My role is to build up industry knowledge, to help the bank understand the sector and better meet its needs. It's a complex sector. For a generalist banker, it can be quite a hard sector to understand. So we're keen to help, and my role is to help the network. So when various individual companies approach the branch business centre, they can get in contact with me. I'm happy to meet those customers, to understand their business, to develop an understanding of what their goals are and how we can help them. Obviously, a lot of the companies at the early stage are pre-revenue, so we'll give the normal banking products and personal credit cards, etc. But in the stage where they come into revenues, we're happy to support them in terms of working capital facilities and leasing and so on. There's also a number, I suppose, we're looking, everybody thinks of the very high potential, high-tech medical technology companies. There's also a lot of sub-supply companies out there, and we see very strong growth in a number of our customers, particularly over the last 7 or 8 years in the sub-supply area. They're very excellent customers from the bank's perspective. We can see, I suppose, Steric Pack going back in time there, we can see how that's grown over the last 20 years from startup to disposing of one of its units there for 70 million. So we're interested in those type of companies as well, not just the sexy cutting edge companies, but also the sub-supply and service companies, which are really important, especially in terms of employment of the sector in maybe the lower skills area.
Very good, thank you, Anne. Congratulations on your support for the Porter Shed. It's a really good initiative by City Hall, the Chamber, etc., and great work by Dave and Maurice O'Gorman. From the bank's perspective, do you think would an initiative like that in the medtech sector work? Obviously not for perhaps production of medtech products, but rather the early stage of R&D activity. Could there be a downtown base for medtech?
Yeah, I suppose it's something we're focusing on the Porter Shed up to now, and it's probably something that we're keen to look at. You obviously have the Innovate program, which is very successful to date and gives a structure to early stage companies starting out. So we'd be keen to look at any proposals anybody has in that area. I think it would be excellent if we could have something adjacent to the Porter Shed. The Medtech accelerator model is probably not as well developed internationally as the tech side. There's probably differences. The timeframes are longer. A typical accelerator in tech is 3 months. That's very short in the life cycle of a medtech startup. But yeah, we'd be very interested in any proposals that anybody wants to make.
Okay, very good. So the well isn't dry. Great. Gillian, looking at the portfolio of companies that the Western Development Commission have invested in over the years, the likes of Aerogen, Canvas, Proxy, and Nuravi, and so on, fantastic stable of companies, innovators. What's the pipeline like? What are you seeing on the ground?
The pipeline is amazing. We're kind of saying if we have another Medtech in Galway come in the door, we'll leave. No, it's fantastic. I mean, we're literally seeing, I think in the last number of months, it just really seems to have blossomed in general, not just Medtech, but specifically Medtech is doing fantastic. What I would say is we need to make sure we're not complacent in the west of Ireland. Galway, our Cork and Dublin certainly are chomping at the bit. We see, from being on the Angel Syndicate, we see a lot of stuff coming through there as well. In general, and again, I think Anne makes a very valid point on the sub-supply, that builds the whole ecosystem, that you can come to the west of Ireland because everything is here. You've got the graduates coming out, you have the talent, but you also have the suppliers, and there's huge opportunities in that as well. And maybe the bar is a little bit lower to get access into that. So the pipeline is good, and keep coming to us. We'd be delighted to look at anything that will give us a return on our investment.
Do you see yourself cashing out on any significant opportunities soon?
Yeah, hopefully. Hopefully.
Tell us.
I know, I mean, like you mentioned, there's some amazing companies, and one of the things that inspires you with supporting these companies is that they save lives, they improve the quality of life. I mean, what Nuravi is doing with third generation stent retrievers is off the scale. I mean, they will hopefully revolutionize stroke treatment. So those kind of companies certainly would hope. Nuravi, Vivasure again, Aerogen, as you said, these are world-leading technologies and teams, and we would hope to make significant return in that, but the return for the region to have those kind of companies, and those guys will come back and they will do it bigger and better the next time, either directly themselves or supporting the next crop. So if you're here as a young entrepreneur, and I think there's some students in the audience, get to know those guys. They are more than willing to help, and ladies I should say, they are more than willing to help. Entrepreneurs, do reach out. I mean, the work that the likes of Maurice and Dave and KPMG themselves, in this Porter Shed, it shows you that people want to nurture and support talent and entrepreneurship. So ask for help, it's there, and hopefully we will grow our west of Ireland. Most of us are involved in this, so our children and our grandchildren will have futures here in the region. We have an amazing place to live, and we want to make it one of the best places in the region.
And of course, a derivative of that is that the Eamon Brady's and Nuravi and the John Powers and Aerogen and so on, they're young enough to go again. So if they do cash out, it'll be I'm back. And
There's a lot of older ones that are well able to go again.
Yeah,
Bernard Collins has been a huge
sure,
advocate,
sure,
you know.
sure,
Yeah,
John
so,
Shoxy, yeah, very good,
they
excellent.
are, yeah.
Okay, Lokesh, I'm a great admirer of what Innovate are doing, and it's been referred to earlier. It's kind of based on the Stanford model, I think, where you go out and look at the unmet need and pull together a diverse team of clinicians, accountants, biomedical engineers, etc., and you go into a clinical setting and observe and see where the unmet need is, and is there a market in the space, if you like. You mentioned convergence. That's very interesting. I think it's probably the next leap in terms of where we're going to. Are there people doing this already abroad? Can we learn from them? Can we bring them over here to work with us?
Interesting question, Brian. Again, going back to what Anne and Julian were saying, I think we need to think about the ecosystem. That's very important. And how we can bring the best people together for solutions. It's really why do it, and who's going to do it. I think that's very important. I think going back then your question about convergence, where is happening. I think what's happening, there's a realization, and again, the technology is becoming cheaper and cheaper nowadays. Yes, medtech takes more time, but the technology to do things is much cheaper and much more affordable now. So a kid could buy a 3D printer at home. This was the case in Kentucky just last year. A 16-year-old boy bought a 3D printer at home and built a robotic arm, connected it using a computer game, and gave it to the girl who didn't have the arm, and the girl is using it. And the whole thing cost less than $400, and anybody can build it now. So that's the technology, right? And I think that's the innovation will come from, is just making it very open to people. Yeah? So there are hubs, you can look at Boston, San Francisco, Toronto, New York, London, obviously, and there are hubs that is happening. I think what's happening really is that there are societal crises that we'll be facing. We'll leave the environmental out there, but the health crisis, the aging generation, the healthy aging. There was a report yesterday about the whole almost catastrophic impact of the antibiotic-resistant bacteria in the world from 2050. Yeah. So the current technologies will not take us there unless we bring different things together. Yeah. So even if you look at how do we track the spread of viruses, the bacteria, it's all based on the mathematical algorithms and ICT. That's how, what's happening right now. What's happening with all the massive amount of data that's been collected in medical informatics. That's been, again, really taken care by, or the sense is coming out by the computer scientists. So IBM has a computer called Watson, and they want to put the doctors out of business. You walk into the hospital, the Watson is there, that has all the information any doctor would have in terms of diagnosing a disease, but also be able to prescribe it. Now, this is far-fetched and futuristic, but imagine the areas where we don't have doctors available, right? So a lot of these things are happening right now, and I can't think why in Galway we can't do that, why in Ireland we can't do that, really. And again, they may seem sometimes far-fetched, futuristic, but that's what's happening right now, So I really believe that Galway is the right place, that we can put the right teams together. And again, I agree with, Julian and Anne about what's happening in terms of the funders, the entrepreneurs, but university has to play an important role and has been playing a role. And I think, again, what I see again in the Galway city is almost like a string of pearls, innovation hubs in different places that are connected. There is no point really when doing something but not being connected to other people, because we are in a smaller area, So I think we have to communicate with each other, we have to build things together better and find synergy at the intersection of everything we are doing. That's important.
Very good, excellent. I have a few questions from the audience here. Maybe Gillian, very briefly, how do you find angel investors? Where are they?
Where are they? Well, they're fantastic news in that in the last couple of years they've come out from under the bushel. Through into the syndicates is the best way of going at them initially. So there is an organisation called HPAN, and they have a number of syndicates around the country. Medtech is based here in Galway. It's a national fund. You have a food fund. You have a dedicated West by Northwest syndicate that John Mullen helped initiate last year. So these guys meet on a quarterly basis. They have 3 to 5 companies come in and pitch and have the opportunity. And in fairness, the angels have money to invest. Now, they make tough decisions. You have to be prepared. You have to know your stuff. And but the hedge fund is the best way of going. There are still other deals with private individuals. So if you know somebody in a particular area that you feel would bring a lot of value to your business, go approach them. But again, you go approach them with a strong business proposition. They're not doing you a favor in that context. If they're investing in you, they want to make sure that you can deliver the return that they require for their investment. So.
Okay, maybe contact yourself also.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Yeah, okay. A question, is there scope or room for a Medtech accelerator in Galway, like the ICT accelerator program that's going to be in the Portrait?
Yes, there is, and I know there is. Enterprise Ireland had a regional call in March for regional accelerators, and they're going to fund 3 to 4, and I know there was one in that particular zone. You probably can talk more to that. So
Okay.
yes, certainly.
Okay.
And again, it's slightly different, so it has to be changed, but the same principles. We do need to accelerate Medtech investment because it
Okay.
burns colossal
Okay.
money.
Okay. A question here on what are the major obstacles that the Medtech sector face over the next 5 to 10 years? I suppose the cost of research, the new initiatives coming through in terms of products and processes, and I suppose caps on government spending perhaps as well in terms of what hospitals will spend. But that's just my toughest worth. What do you think, Lokesh?
I think you're absolutely right there. You're absolutely right. But I think going back to, I think it was Anne who made the point, or maybe Gillian, I think both of them, that we really need to encourage entrepreneurs to come together. And we have to remove the stigma that failure is bad. Especially there'll be more failures, there'll be more time in Medtech sector. I think we need to be patient. But there will be a very significant reward at the end of that. So we really need to get more people engaged in the great ideas coming forward, and we just support them and sustain them.
Okay. There's a question here. I'm not quite sure. Yes? Go on. Go on, please.
Okay, I'm not coming from a corporate background, it's more media and arts, but I think it's interesting that there's a lot of money being invested in mindfulness. There's obviously money to be made. And I'm just wondering, is there money or research being done for food? That's where my interest is, nutrition, food and water that seem to be commodities. There's places in the world that are seed saving, and I think that's the way of the future. You said you look out into the world and you're researching, and I'm just curious, are you doing that? It seems to be like the elephant in the room. There's all this technology and medicine and pharmaceuticals and all that, but obviously we're connected, but we're completely disconnected at the same time. So I'm just wondering, is there research into self-sufficiency and food and water? I just think Galway would be a great place for that, because like Therese's father's a farmer. So people aren't that disconnected from the land. So it's a good opportunity to possibly invest money in that.
That's an excellent question, actually, if I may, Brian. Okay, so it's actually a big question in a way. We focus on technology, we focus on what's possible, but what's essential is to think of sustainability. Right? The Native American saying would be that we should look at the impact of our actions for the 7th generation from now. Right? And I think the pendulum is swinging now, that there are more and more people connecting, coming together to think about the impact of our actions for future, and there is more emphasis on sustainable technologies. What are we doing to the environment because of our technology? So I'm always an optimist. I would hold out hope, but you're absolutely right that Galway, I think being at the top end of technology, but also being connected to the nature, the ancient wisdom, the area we live in, I think again has an opportunity to demonstrate to the world that you could be really at the edge of technology, but also you don't have to lose your connection, with the ground, with the earth, with the climate, with the nature. And again, I think it'll be important that if we can demonstrate that we're thinking about the future generation as well.
Very good. I think we have time for just one more brief question, if there are any. Yes, George.
Brian, just to add to the conversation there, which is really interesting in relation to the Medtech roadmap in Galway, and just to make the point that the continued funding, state funding for research for medical devices is super critical, and we need to make sure that we don't underestimate that. I mean, as an example, some of the companies that you mentioned there, say Nuravi, and I run the Innovation Centre in GMIT, so we have 6 companies through our hands on medical devices, Nuravi being one of them. But at the very early stages, Nuravi was able to do research well over €100,000 to develop the initial model which would look at trapping the clot before it goes into the brain. So the funding from Enterprise Ireland and from the other areas, and maybe is critical if there was a way of actually expanding on that and maybe leveraging that. If you take another example, company like, say, Neosurgical, what they did was just pure innovation. I mean, client of ours, they have developed a product to close the wounds left with keyhole surgery in a more innovative way. But was there products on the market before they did that? Absolutely. Operations were happening all over the world. But what they did really, really well in Galway, with the support of ourselves in GMIT, was looked at that and innovated around it. And their product is out on the marketplace. In fact, they've sold 2,000 products at the end of 2015, and they've just reached a major milestone of over 10,000 uses of the new product in the USA alone. And that's all happening in Galway, driven in Galway. But I just think the support of the R&D from the likes of ourselves and from NUIG is super critical, because when we look at going forward and taking the point about convergence, it's about developing new products and services. And if we don't have the continued funding, indeed from Enterprise Ireland and other sources, we won't be able to develop those products and services that we need.
Very good. Thank you, George.
So, Brian, it was just occurs to me something that people mightn't be that aware of generally is the SME instrument funding, which is funding's been in place for the last couple of years over the Horizon 2020 programme. And we've seen a number of our customers, early stage medtech companies, have got significant funding under that programme, which is grant funding. And I think there's been 15 companies have got phase 2, which can be up to 2.5 million. And to date, and 7 of those were in the life science area. So that's something to bear in mind if you're looking at your sources of funding, that the SME instrument. And historically, under the old programme, you had to be involved in a collaboration with a number of partners, including academic institutions. But under the SME instrument, a company in its own right can make an application for the funding.
Thank you, Anne. Just a final point. John Breslin produced a map of the medtech companies in Galway, which is very helpful. You can see the companies quite extensive and a good indication of where they're located within the city. So happy to give you a copy of that. I'm sure you'll be able to get it from the college here or John directly. Also, I brought along a few brochures covering knowledge development box and R&D tax credits for those that are interested. They're here in the front. It just finally remains for me to, I suppose, just conclude this session. It's a good time to break, actually, because there's a coffee break now. So if you do have questions and an unmet need in terms of an answer, we can hopefully take care of that during the coffee break. I just want to finally thank the speakers, Lokesh, Gillian and Anne, for giving so generously of their experience and comments.